The first time I saw the police walk into our HOA meeting with a warrant, I didn't feel triumph. I felt relief, like my lungs finally remembered how to breathe, because a week earlier all I wanted was to pull into my own driveway after a brutal ER shift, and instead I found a woman calling herself the neighborhood authority parked like she owned my life. I'm Jake Miller, mid-30s ER nurse, the kind of guy who's calm when blood is on the floor and alarms are screaming. But apparently I'm difficult because I don't smile and nod when the Homeowners Association tries to micromanage my mailbox. Maple Ridge Estates looked perfect from the listing: quiet street, tidy lawns, friendly waves. Then you meet the HOA board and you realize the friendly part comes with a clipboard and a threat. Her name was Melissa Hart, bleached blonde bob, pastel blazer, wedge heels that clicked like a judge's gavel. She didn't act like she served the HOA. She acted like she was crowned by it. That morning I turned onto my street, half-asleep stomach, empty brain, still stuck in hospital mode. And there it was, an oversized white SUV stretched across my driveway like a barricade. Not just kind of in the way, full-on blocking it front to back, like she wanted me to know this was intentional. Melissa stood on the sidewalk sipping iced coffee with another board member, laughing like she'd just told the funniest joke in the world. I rolled my window down and said, "Melissa, move your car." She didn't even look at me right away, just tilted her head and said, "Jake, this is a public street. I can park wherever I want." "That's not the street," I said, pointing at my driveway like it was the most obvious thing on earth. "That's my driveway." She waved her hand, dismissive, bored, like I was a mosquito. "You've been reported for excessive lawn growth," she said. "We're doing a visual inspection. HOA business." I stared at my lawn. It was trimmed neat, better than half the block, and she knew it. Then she smiled sweet on the outside, cold underneath. "No tow company is going to touch an HOA officer's vehicle," she said like she was delivering a sentence. So I did the one thing she didn't expect. I stopped arguing. I took photos, wide shots, close-ups, license plate tires, the SUV cutting across the concrete like it belonged there. Then I went inside, pulled up the city code for blocking private driveways, and made one call. 15 minutes later, a big red tow truck rumbled onto my street. Loud, unapologetic, the exact opposite of Melissa's fake polite control. Her head snapped toward it like she'd just heard a gunshot. She stormed over heels, stabbing the pavement, and hissed, "What do you think you're doing? You can't do this." The driver didn't even blink. "Blocking a private driveway is a violation," he said, already sliding chains into place. "Homeowner complaint and photo evidence. Easy day." Melissa tried the badge flash routine. "I'm on the HOA board, and you should know better," he said, hooking the front bumper like it was nothing. She turned to me, eyes sharp, voice low. "You're going to regret this, Jake." I crossed my arms and said, "Not as much as you're going to regret parking like a tyrant." Her SUV was gone before she could finish her next threat, and the silence afterward. Beautiful, for about 2 days. Saturday morning, I'm under my kitchen sink fixing a leak when the doorbell rings. I open the door, and there's a kid, early 20s, blue polo, clipboard laminated badge that reads Compliance Officer. He won't meet my eyes. "Jake Miller," he asks, like he already hates his job. He hands me a folded notice. "Non-compliant landscaping. Unauthorized exterior modifications. Obstructing HOA procedures." I actually laughed out loud, because it wasn't just petty, it was revenge printed on official letterhead. They claimed my lawn exceeded the height limit. They claimed my outdoor lights were unapproved installations, even though those lights were there when I bought the house. Buried in the fine print was the real punchline: an internal hearing scheduled for next Thursday. A disciplinary meeting, their little courtroom, where they were judge, jury, and executioner. When the kid walked back to the curb, I saw Melissa sitting in the passenger seat of a white sedan, sunglasses on, sipping from a tumbler. She didn't even look at me. That night I sat at my kitchen table with the notice in front of me, and for the first time since I moved in, I felt tired in a way sleep couldn't fix. Not hospital tired, not long shift tired. This was different. Because what do you do when the people harassing you are the ones writing the rules? I'll be honest. I started second-guessing myself. Maybe I should have just waited. Maybe I should have swallowed my pride, parked on the street, and let her play queen for an hour. Maybe I made it worse by standing up. And that's the part no one talks about, the moment where you sit alone staring at a piece of paper and you wonder if you're the problem, because fighting back comes with a cost, and the cost starts to feel personal. Then I opened the HOA bylaws I'd requested during escrow, this thick binder nobody reads because it's boring, and because bullies count on that. And buried deep in there was a clause that changed everything. Any enforcement hearing required written notice with specific complaints, evidence, witness statements, and a real opportunity to respond. None of that had happened. They weren't just being nasty. They were bluffing. So I got to work. I pulled timestamps from my security cameras. I pulled the inspection report from when I bought the house. I pulled old listing photos that showed the same outdoor lights 5 years back. Then I called my neighbor, Carla Reyes, sharp, no-nonsense, used to do paralegal work, and she'd been waiting for someone to finally push back. She said, "You're not crazy. She does this to everyone. People are just scared." Carla printed flyers that said, "Know your rights," and slipped them into mailboxes up and down the street. And suddenly, my doorbell started ringing for a different reason. A retired Navy mechanic, a single mom with 3 kids, a couple who got hit with a $500 fine for excessive holiday decor. Different faces, same story, selective enforcement, made-up violations, and Melissa's signature on all of it. Thursday came fast. The hearing was held in a model home. The HOA had turned into an office. Fake plants, cheap sparkling water, motivational posters about community standards. I walked in with a folder full of documents, and 2 neighbors who agreed to sit behind me. Melissa sat at the table like a dictator in a pastel suit. She clicked her pen and said, "We'll begin. Do you accept responsibility for your violations?" I set my folder down and said no. Her smile twitched. "This isn't a courtroom, Mr. Miller." I opened the bylaws, flipped to the clause, and slid it across the table. "Then why do your rules require evidence and due process? Because you didn't provide any. This hearing violates your own governance." One board member leaned in to read it, suddenly pale. The other looked like he wished he could melt into the carpet. Melissa's voice tightened. "We're not required to follow legal standards." "That's where you're wrong," I said, steady, controlled. "The Homeowners Association operates under state law. Due process still applies." Then I handed her a printed notice. "Also, I filed a formal complaint. Any fines you issue now will be considered retaliation." For a second the room went quiet, so quiet I could hear the cheap air conditioner clicking. Melissa's jaw clenched hard enough to crack teeth. I stood up and said, "This isn't over. It's just started." That night, I got something slid under my door. No envelope. Just a single sheet of paper, HOA expenses from the last fiscal year. One line jumped out like it was glowing: consulting fee for $200, Hart Solutions, LLC. Hart, as in Melissa Hart. I stared at that paper for a long time, feeling my heartbeat in my throat. Because now, it wasn't just harassment. It smelled like money. The next morning, I filed a public records request with the city clerk. And I called a local investigative reporter, Julia Monroe, who had that tone in her voice like she'd been waiting for a story like this. She came to my house, set up her recorder on my dining table, and skimmed the documents like she was reading a menu. Her eyes locked on the LLC line item, and she said, "You're telling me the HOA paid a company tied to the board chair, with no public contract?" "Not tied," I said. "Owned." Julia nodded slowly. "Then this isn't petty. This is fraud." The story aired within days. And just like that, Melissa stopped playing quiet revenge games and went for the throat. An emergency HOA meeting was called. Packed chairs, tense faces, whispers crawling across the room. Melissa stood at the front and announced a 20% dues increase to cover legal costs, acting like she was protecting the neighborhood from an invasion. She wouldn't call on me when I raised my hand, so I stood up anyway. I held up the budget report and said, "This isn't about legal costs. This is about you covering your tracks." Her voice snapped. "You don't understand the complexities of board management." "Funny," I said louder now, "because these consulting expenses don't show up in the public reports. Someone doctored the record." Murmurs rolled through the crowd like distant thunder. Carla stood up and said, "Motion to suspend the board until an independent audit is completed." Hands shot up. One, then another, then half the room. Melissa tried to speak, but the room wasn't listening anymore. People weren't afraid, they were angry. Then the door opened. A woman stepped in with a badge, Detective Renee Caldwell. Behind her, 2 officers. She said, calm as ice, Melissa Hart, and board members present. We have a warrant to seize financial records and electronic devices associated with the Homeowners Association. The room froze. Melissa's face went white like all the blood drained out at once. You can't do this, she sputtered. Not in the middle of a meeting. Detective Caldwell raised an eyebrow. Actually, this is the best time. We'd hate to see anything go missing. Officers moved forward, collecting laptops, binders, a tablet. Melissa clutched too late. She backed up, mouth opening and closing, no words landing. For the first time since I'd met her, she looked small, not powerful, not untouchable. Just a woman realizing her little kingdom was built on paper and paper tears. As they escorted her out, she finally looked at me, and there was nothing left in her eyes, no smugness, no superiority, just panic. I didn't smile. I just exhaled, because I didn't start this fight to be a hero. I started it because I wanted my driveway back. And the lesson is simple: when someone uses an HOA like a weapon, the only way to stop them is to document everything and refuse to bend.